No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live, episode number 118. Click and subscribe to our brand new independent news source. Make sure you turn on the notification bell, then you'll be alerted to our live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Breaking right now, I spent 3 hours with Tommy Robinson at HMP Woodhill on Saturday. I believe you have a right to know what he told me about the Southport accused Axel Rudakubana, and I will reveal all in my digest next. Then, reaction and analysis from Howard Cox, the former Reform UK candidate for London Mayor and the genius behind the FairFuel campaign. Also coming up on the show today, the judiciary schedule 3 seismic court cases to start on the day of Trump's inauguration. They really must think we're stupid, right? Labour follows the Kamala Harris playbook by ludicrously suggesting Nigel Farage and Reform UK are a threat to democracy. And a breaking bombshell in the Lucy Letby case. Her new lawyer reveals shocking brand new evidence that means the nurse's convictions must be overturned. Then, in the uncancelled after show today, Steph, the altar nerd, joins Outspoken for the first time to reveal how be kind woke hypocrite Meghan Markle is at the centre of a sweatshop scandal. And big breaking news, it's been a very busy day. Prince Andrew and Fergie will not attend Christmas at Sandringham amid the Chinese spy scandal. And remember, the uncancelled after show is now broadcast exclusively daily and on demand on my Substack, which you can Google or get to right now by visiting www.outspoken.live. If you subscribe to a monthly paid membership, you get access to the after show Monday to Friday, my exclusive reporting and columns, our live chats on the Substack app, and the chance to join a thriving community. Most importantly, it is a safe space free of censorship. That really matters, given the big tech censorship that we have seen over topics like, for example, Tommy Robinson. But the most important thing is that you visit www.outspoken.live and you can subscribe completely for free. I know how difficult times are at the moment. The most important thing is that I have that direct connection with you to help bring this independent news revolution, because we cannot trust the MSM. But now, let's go. My job as an independent journalist and broadcaster is to reveal and report the truths the MSM refuses to cover. So often, the corrupt and captured legacy media hides difficult realities or movements by omission. What they don't cover and who they ban from even being mentioned can be as instructive as the propaganda they constantly pump out. As a viewer of Outspoken, you will know that I have been horrified but not shocked by the willful blindness of virtually all of the establishment, including GB News, to cower behind contempt of court when failing to report on the Southport massacre cover-up and what the Prime Minister and Home Secretary knew when about Axel Rudakubana, including his alleged possession of an Al-Qaeda manual and production of ricin. Now, given they were all telling the public that any suggestion the stabbing of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift dance class could have been motivated by Islamist extremism was nothing more than a far-right lie, I believe this really matters. So on Saturday, my quest for the truth took me to the segregation unit of HMP Woodhill, where the political prisoner Tommy Robinson is being housed in solitary confinement in, wait for it, a wing of cells that should be housing terrorists. There are 16 of those cells, by the way, but he is kept completely on his own, given the gravity of the threat to his safety behind bars. Now, what's Tommy's crime? Airing a piece of independent journalism, because yes, the UK in 2024 really is that effed up. And of course, first and foremost, I must clarify, I was visiting Tommy in a personal capacity, which is what the law requires in the UK. It was very important to me to be face-to-face with him, to find out about his conditions inside prison, and actually much more of what is now an obviously coordinated establishment and media witch hunt to silence him, which I believe will end up failing. But what is behind this campaign? Well, Tommy, you see, is who I would describe as an old school working class hero. The type of guy that actually all political parties despise. A traditional Englishman who has been utterly ignored and despised by progressive liberal elites. They actually look at him, as somehow too dirty or too stupid to cope with his truths. While Douglas Murray and Jordan Peterson are tolerated by the establishment because they're a little bit posh, Tommy, they have decided, must literally be locked away. Silenced, ironically. Now, unlike most gutless journalists and broadcasters, I refuse to pretend that Tommy is not a significant force in the reshaping of the right of British politics. We have been in regular communication since my departure from GB News right up until his incarceration, and you will know that I speak about him regularly on this show. Within our 3-hour conversation, which I will tell you was watched at all times by at least 2 prison officers, I was able to get to the bottom of an email that Tommy was purported to have sent to the brilliant independent journalist Lewis Brackpool, but we had been unable to verify at the time. And that email suggested that Axel Rudakubana, had been attending mosque at Belmarsh prison. Tommy confirmed to me that it is well known at the prison where he had initially been detained that Rudakubana is indeed a practicing Muslim. But Tommy did clarify that his belief is his activities are limited to a multi-faith prayer room rather than a separate mosque. So just to give you a little bit of context, the Southport accused was housed in the medical wing in Belmarsh on the floor above Tommy's former cell, but it is well known within the prison that he attends prayers with the Muslim population. This was an open conversation within the walls of Belmarsh. There was not the slightest doubt that Rudakubana is now practicing his Muslim faith, having converted at some point in the past decade. Now, there was much else we discussed about Southport and what Nigel Farage has rightly described as the biggest cover-up of our lifetime.
Southport, all I can say to you right now is I know a hell of a lot more than the British public know. A hell of a lot more. I've been completely silenced. I dared, the day after Southport, to do a video to say, can we please know who this man is? Was he known to the authorities? Why do I feel we're not being told the truth? The level of demonisation I came under for that from both front benches was astonishing. From media commentators, demonisation on a level that I'd never even experienced. Now I'm told by the Speaker of the House of Commons, I can't ask questions about it in the House of Commons. Parliamentary privilege is out of the window. Even rumours today that the court case, which is due in January, every effort is being made to defer it. Right? Yeah, this is what's going on. We are witnessing one of the biggest cover-ups we've ever seen in our lives. And I won't say any more than that. I genuinely would never wish to be in contempt of court. I have respect for our legal system. It's not perfect, but it's a damn sight better than most of the rest of the world.
I'm becoming less sure of that, to be honest, especially given that there is much of what Tommy and I discussed about the Southport massacre cover-up that I simply cannot repeat here without being dragged into court myself by the Attorney General. But there is nothing to stop reporting of Rudakubana's religious practices within jail today and the lies we were told by Starmer and Cooper to scare us into silence. As Tommy said to me, they knew that what they were telling us was a lie. Indeed, I believe it remains of the utmost public interest, given that for many weeks, the horrified British population was led to believe Rudakubana was a practicing Christian. Now, the former PM, Liz Truss, told me on Outspoken earlier this year that it is unfathomable that both Starmer and Cooper would not have been told almost instantly about the Al-Qaeda and Ricin discovery. Yet not one MSM journalist, given countless opportunities, has questioned them on this extraordinary and egregious concealment of the gravest order. Remember, Reform UK Deputy Richard Tice intended to do just that at PMQs until receiving a blanket warning from the Speaker Lindsay Hoyle, seemingly debunking the concept of parliamentary privilege. Only Robert Jenrick, the Tory Shadow Justice Secretary, has dared to go there since, including on this show, calling out the MSM.
I don't want people to be calling out incidents, squeamishly or selectively, as we saw earlier in the summer. In fact, I want the media to be able to speak about these things much more openly than they are today. I'm worried that we are sliding into the position that we see in some other European countries like Germany, where there is censorship, either by regulation or self-censorship, and serious crimes that are being committed, for example, by illegal migrants on the streets, are not being covered properly out of fear for community tensions and community cohesion issues. That is wrong. And we need to be ensuring that our media are calling out what is happening, no veil of secrecy being drawn over what's happening on our own streets. That is letting the British public down.
That's why the revelation that Rudakubana is practicing the Muslim faith behind bars openly is significant, even though I expect the MSM to continue to ignore this story. Now, I can also tell you that Tommy Robinson remains the victim of judicial and police witch hunts. One is so outrageous that I'm going to discuss it on tomorrow's show. But on the political front, Tommy also had a clear message to me that he wanted delivered to Nigel Farage and Reform UK. It's a pretty positive message, actually. He simply says, stop attacking the Uniting the Kingdom cultural movement. Stop calling us that lot. Stop attacking Tommy Robinson perfectly. Allow the right to unite. And given the seriousness of what our troubled United Kingdom is facing under this Labour hellscape and the growing threat to our security, I think that advice would be wise to heed. But now, the outsider. And it is a joy today to be joined by Howard Cox. He was the London mayoral candidate for Reform UK and, of course, the great man behind the FairFuel campaign, fighting for Britain's motorists. Now, Howard Cox, you came up in my very lengthy conversation with Tommy Robinson behind bars at HMP Woodhill at the weekend because, of course, you have been a big part of this whole discussion regarding Reform UK, that lot, etc., etc., etc. And I will come to that. But first, I just want to start talking about Axel Rudakubana because, of course, you have also on this show revealed information in the past suggesting that the authorities knew that Axel Rudakubana was indeed Muslim. What do you make of this revelation that he is practicing his faith behind bars in Belmarsh?
Well, Dan, congratulations on the interview and talking to Tommy. I think you're incredible, both of you, and getting this out there because the mainstream media is completely ignoring it, as we all know. But it's no surprise that this man is a practicing Muslim. As you know, people have come to me and told me who were actually there at the arrest, and he was shouting Allahu Akbar as he was being arrested. So the clue was right from the beginning. It was there. And, I mentioned this to you on the show about a month ago, didn't I? And, I've been attacked by various people in various parts of our party, just saying I shouldn't say these things, but I'm only passing on the truth.
Indeed. Absolutely. And why this is so politically significant, Howard Cox, is that there are literally people behind bars right now, in part because they suggested Axel Rudakubana was an Islam extremist.
I know, it's ridiculous. We're seeing this two-tier policing, two-tier judiciary system, the whole thing now. What I want to know is why is there a cover-up with this? What's the problem with this? This man committed a horrible act of violence, and we should be talking all about how bad this man is and what his motivations are. Why is that such a thing to be objected to or ignored by the mainstream media? I just do not understand this.
Well, the thing is, what
I'm
I
proud
feel,
that
Howard, is they hide behind contempt of court. Because, of course, we want this guy to have a fair trial, right? Of course we want him to have a fair trial. But there's absolutely nothing to stop us reporting on the fact that he was shouting Allahu Akbar when he was arrested. The fact that the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister would have been informed of the Al-Qaeda manual at his house and the ricin when they were continuing to suggest to the public that this guy was a Christian who just happened to go into a Taylor Swift dance class. So I think the problem is, it's a bit like the Speaker in Parliament. It's almost like a blanket ban on this. It becomes a cone of silence because they just want to push this conversation out of the public narrative. Now, I think in this case, we're not going to forget it, are we, Howard? It doesn't matter how far away this trial is. We are not going to forget what happened, because it was almost like this was the moment a switch was flicked in the minds of the British public. We have had enough of that whole approach of don't look back in anger. We've all got to come together after one of these tragedies. No. When you go in to a dance class with 3 young girls, that's when we say enough.
Absolutely right. And I'm so proud of Nigel Farage. He's a friend and obviously he's my party's leader, and coming out with what he did. But it's a shame that his hands were tied by Lindsay Hoyle. I just do not get it. I think Lindsay Hoyle was actually abusing the parliamentary privilege aspect of our democracy, because that's the whole point of sitting in the House of Commons. You can basically say what you want on the basis to look after your constituency's welfare. Why he stopped that, I don't know. Who was acting and instructing him? I'd love to know.
Then, of course, we come to the question of Reform UK and Tommy Robinson. And you came up in our conversation in prison because Tommy was aware, actually. It's incredible. He's very switched on because he does receive emails. So a lot of what goes on this show, but also on Maya Tusi's show and Paul Thorpe's show, is reported back to Tommy. And he's very, very grateful, by the way, for the viewers who keep in touch with him, because that is his access to the news. It's a very antiquated system how it works in there, Howard. So he is allowed a laptop, but the laptop has no internet connection. He can read the emails, reply to them, but a lot of them are censored. And so if you haven't heard back from him, it's quite possibly for that reason. But he was aware of your appearance on Outspoken. He was very grateful for the fact that you stood up for that lot. And his real message to Nigel Farage and Reform UK, Howard, is not, oh, you've got to let me in. Oh, you've got to become a pro-Tommy Robinson party. He doesn't want that. He wants the Uniting the Kingdom movement to be a separate cultural phenomenon, a bit like almost like the Tea Party in the US or something like that a few years ago. But he does want the attacks to stop. What he finds unpalatable and crossing the line is personal attacks on him and also personal attacks on his supporters. And I know that actually you agree with that, Howard, right?
Absolutely right. I mean, I've had personal attacks galore for, I don't know Tommy very well. I know there's 2 schools of thought from him about his past and what he's doing now. What he's doing now, I totally support. He's phenomenal as far as I'm concerned. He is, as you say, a working class hero. And I'm proud to actually say that I'm one of that lot, that actually something like half of that lot that support him are Reform UK people. And I've been bombarded by people saying, well done, Howard, standing up for that situation. It doesn't mean to say that I will not question him for some of the things he's done in the past, but that's irrelevant at the moment. We should be actually getting behind him. And I don't understand politics. I've stood for London Mayor, and I've stood for as an MP down in Dover and Deal and came second down there. And I'm proud to do that. But the reason why is I was a proud Tory, and we've lost the Tory party, a proud Thatcherite. And I believed in freedom of speech, small state, low tax, all the things that Reform UK are standing for at the moment. That's why Richard Tice asked me to stand as London Mayor. And, we didn't have the resources then. And at that point, Nigel hadn't declared he was standing for to become leader of Reform. So I didn't have that backing. Obviously, his standing did help me become second. I got 24% of the vote in Dover. If after 3.5 weeks campaigning.
I mean, it was incredible. I'm gutted though, because God, you would be a good MP, Howard. Maybe at the next election. But can I just clarify, because I know, as you say, there's been a lot of criticism, but you did say that your belief was that Nigel didn't like the "that lot" criticism. Is that still your belief?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair comment. I'm not going to. There's a lot of stuff, private conversations, and I'm not breaking trust here. I think that lot was a big mistake to be put out there, because it did actually diminish the enthusiasm for reform by saying that lot, who just happened to support a working class hero in Tommy Robinson, who's basically saying give us back our country, as what Lee Anderson has been saying for a long time. It's what Rupert Lowe's been saying for a long time. But saying that lot was the wrong thing to say, and I do believe that Nigel didn't like that.
And it is interesting, isn't it? Because what Tommy Robinson has created with Uniting the Kingdom is actually something that so many political movements are desperate to create. ARC, for example, with Jordan Peterson, desperate to create that. And in fact, the next Uniting the Kingdom rally, which will be held when Tommy is released from prison, I think there's a strong possibility that Jordan Peterson will agree to speak at the rally. Now, can the MSM keep ignoring it at that point, or keep trying to describe it as a hate march at that point? I mean, remember, there was no violence at the Uniting the Kingdom rally at all. Compare that to the pro-Hamas marches, which are incredibly violent every single week in London. Or, for example, the Black Lives Matter demonstrations back in 2020, which were incredibly violent. So does there have to become a tipping point, I guess, is what I'm getting at, Howard, where all of a sudden the mainstream media realizes, actually, we can't keep ignoring this guy, or we can't keep demonizing this guy. He is a part of the conversation in the same way that Douglas Murray is part of the conversation, and Jordan Peterson is part of the conversation. In fact, a lot of times, Howard, they say very similar things. So is the difference that they just happen to have posh voices?
Yeah, maybe. I'm a common Southeast London boy born in Lewisham, so maybe I'm closer than Tommy than others might think. But just to give you an example, what happened about a week and a half ago, I had a 2-hour conversation in Portcullis House, which is the home of for your viewers, the home of the MPs, their offices, with a very senior Tory MP who requested me to be there, and he made the point. It's about time, and this is supporting what you're saying, Dan, about the MSM. But the fact is, what we're seeing at the moment is the right side of politics, and I only mean centre right to a little bit. I don't mean right fascism and all that sort of thing. I'm talking about to centre right just a little bit further, is so disparate. We've got the Tories, we've got Reform, we've got all these people, and what people are crying out for is to bring that together. And the only people that can bring that together at the moment is Nigel and Kemi. And I would, my plea, even though we've heard things like we've got to obliterate the Tories, I'm sorry, I think it's a case of we've all got to swallow our pride, swallow our egos, get together and sit down, because this Labour government is going to destroy this country, and it's going to destroy it based on socialist idealism, and I can't bear that. I'm 70 years of age, mate, and I'm not going to bear this any further.
Yeah, no, I do understand what you're saying, but this is where I also think, though, it has to factor in the grassroots movement. It has to factor in the Tommy Robinson movement too. That's where it's really interesting. Obviously, in the US, Donald Trump was a big enough character and a big enough force to do that. But goodness me, look at how they tried to destroy him, Howard, time and again. Yeah. So the question to me is Nigel Farage big enough to do it? I think he is, actually. I think he is. But that's why it's critical that he doesn't turn so many people off right at the beginning and sort of harnesses this cultural movement. Because, I mean, Howard, the idea that people would try and describe me or you as far right is ludicrous. It's insanity. As fascists, I mean, come on. So this is why I think people have to wake up to what's going on. if you continue to brand us as that, we dismiss you because it is a joke. It is an absolute joke. But just before we move on to this two-tier justice thing, it is astonishing, isn't it, that Tommy Robinson is in a wing of 16 cells on his own because they are so terrified for his safety in Woodhill. He shouldn't even be there, Howard.
Absolutely right, Dan. He shouldn't be in there. He should be outside. He should be maybe, for the fact he actually did, regarding his film, he did play his film, etc. And there was, he did break some that restriction on him and doing that. And to cut a long story short, it's nothing. I mean, we're going to come on to two-tier judiciary and policing in a minute. I've got a classic example of something I was in court the other day on talking about the Tooting Four. You may have heard of it. But the simple thing is, in terms of Tommy, he should be out on the streets and he should have the same protection that any major political leader should have because he is under attack. But he should not be sitting in that jail.
No, it's a joke. It's a complete joke. And there's more judicial witch hunts against him, by the way, Howard, which I'm going to talk about as the week goes on. What I will say, though, because I know a lot of you are interested in his state of mind, his mentality, his physicality, I was actually really surprised by how well Tommy is doing. He gets 4 visits a week. A couple of days before me, he'd seen his son, and he's strong, actually. He is strong. He's very focused on what's next. He has big documentaries planned, which are going to rock the Labour Party and the establishment to its core next year. But there are difficulties, of course. There are financial difficulties. There are difficulties in terms of ongoing lawfare. But given the situation he's in, I actually thought he was particularly strong. The politicised judiciary, though, under two-tier care, must really believe that we are stupid. Because this afternoon, the OnlyFans model Victoria Thomas-Bowen escaped a jail term despite assaulting Nigel Farage during the election campaign. Now, just think about that for 1 second, given that she is free, yet Lucy Connolly, Julie Sweeney, who happened to send a tweet or make a Facebook post after the Southport massacre, are languishing behind bars for over 2 years. Now, Farage said after the verdict, we now live in a country where you can assault a member of parliament and not go to prison, the latest example of two-tier justice. Then, let me get to the big cover-up. On January the 20th, 2025, the world will stop for the historic inauguration of Donald Trump, for which I think there's been no comparison in terms of celebrity, in terms of glamour, but also in terms of political importance since JFK in 1961. Yet that day, when the full force of the mainstream media, well, understandably in this case, be on Washington, D.C., that day will see the commencement of 3 trials that could and should define and actually destroy Starmer's premiership. The Axel Rudakubana murder trial begins in what is, I believe, the most highly anticipated criminal case in modern British history. So too does the trial of Labour councillor Ricky Jones for encouraging violent disorder. Also, Anthony Essan for the attempted murder, do you remember that, of Lieutenant Colonel Mark Teaton. So these cretins really think we're stupid, don't they? But while the eyes of the world might be on Washington, D.C., and thank God on a daily basis that Trump is going to be given the opportunity to save the West from itself, let me tell you, my eyes will be laser focused on these trials, because when it comes to Rudakubana, I fear a whitewash. But there are a lot of other people talking about this cover-up too. Alex Phillips posted on X, the Southport trial starts on the 20th of January. That's right, Inauguration Day. So news channels will be showing back-to-back coverage of America. As the court announces, there will be strict reporting restrictions so as not to prejudice the trial. The stitch-up will continue, mark my words. God Save Great Britain described this as the biggest cover-up of our lifetime. World by Wolf wrote, guess who else has a trial date on the 20th of January? You really thought we wouldn't notice, Home Office? And Nick Buckley posted, "Do not allow our government to hide these 3 court appearances and cases. Make sure you discuss them on the day. We will not be manipulated like this." Now, Howard Cox, it is utterly extraordinary, isn't it? And they really must think we're stupid if they think that this is just a coincidence. The most important day in American politics in years just happens to be the day that these 3 trials start in the UK. What a joke.
Well, it's a clear attempt to bury these stories, but the big thing here, Dan, is who is actually instructing the CPS to schedule these dates, and who's actually doing it. It's got to be a political instruction, and is it coming from the very top? Is Keir Starmer actually saying make sure those trials are buried as much as possible, and what's the best day to do it? When the inauguration of the new president of America. So I cannot believe this is being allowed, and I hope that the famous 5, our 5 MPs at Reform UK will really, interrogate Keir Starmer all the way to the 20th.
And then you just think about, as Alex Phillips rightly points out, what sort of restrictions are going to be put in place here? What are we going to be told we can't report? What is going to be only made available to the jury? I have big concerns about that. And I really am starting to disagree with Nigel Farage when we say, oh, yes, we have the best judicial system in the world. Isn't there a time, Howard, where actually we have to say, no, we need transparency now. There are reasons that we no longer trust our judiciary. Our judiciary in recent years has become increasingly political. Personally, I'd like to see cameras in the courtroom. Actually, I'd like to see all the evidence on display. I would like to head towards an American system.
Well, I totally agree with you. I always supported the cameras in Parliament, for example. I witnessed a travesty of justice recently. You probably heard of the Tooting Four. We're going back to, I've been on something like 25 anti-ULEZ protests in London to stop the ULEZ expansion or protest against it. And it's always peaceful. It was always fun, carnival-like. Children were there. We had antique fire engines there. We had a big double-decker bus giving rise to people. And the police, 3 or 4 were present. Everyone was friendly and got on with each other. But the last particular anti-ULEZ protest was a few days before the actual mayoral election that I was standing in. And that was held in Tooting. And unfortunately, the Mayor of London, for example, used his powers, as Police and Crime Commissioner of London, to actually put together a case against 4 or 5 people who simply were there, like they were doing for 60 previous anti-ULEZ protests, objecting to the ULEZ expansion. And guess what happened? They were found guilty of abuse, making his family feeling, Sadiq Khan's family feeling, very worried and of their safety, etc. They were 300 meters away from his house, nowhere near it whatsoever. And the worst thing about it is he wasn't even in his house that day. And I've actually took part in 2 previous Tooting-based, because that's where it was, where he lives, Tooting-based protests, and we were even closer. But the police were friendly and everything. But guess what? There were 100 police turned up in flat jackets and all the other things, and it really put people's back up. And not one of those 4 people, most of them were pensioners, mid-70s, those sorts of things, were causing any violent or abusive behaviour whatsoever. And yet a single judge, a district judge, on this Westminster Magistrates Court, found them guilty and fined them £1,000 each, approximately. That sort of thing.
And yet pro-Hamas marches are allowed to cause literal havoc and literal violence on a weekly basis. And actually, I want to ask you about the OnlyFans model who escaped jail today. Now, the thing is, okay, yes, it was only a milkshake, Howard Cox, but it's not the point, is it? Because we know that Joe Brand has joked about throwing battery acid over Nigel Farage. We know that Nigel Farage is the most under threat politician in our country. This was during an election campaign. It was utterly terrifying, the lack of support that he had. And she escapes a jail sentence altogether Victoria Thomas Bowen will not spend a day behind bars, and I just keep thinking about Lucy Connolly in prison for 2.5 years for a tweet.
That could have been acid. I cannot believe a judge can sit there and say, you're free to go, you know, don't be a naughty girl again, etc. He's actually condoning her actions and saying, yes, you were right to throw something at a potential, a lot of people are saying the future Prime Minister of this country. I cannot believe that our judiciary system has descended. I've never been in court before for, anyone having to go at me, but to witness to what happens in court, I am staggered how incompetent it is, how disjointed it is, how evidence is actually ignored, and how people actually giving true evidence are not allowed to speak. These are the sorts of things we're seeing at the moment, Dan. And, I cannot believe it. I'm very worried for our system in this country. And I agree with you, what you said earlier. Nigel said he's proud of this, our judiciary system. I'm not. I think it's plummeting.
It is, totally, because it's politicised. I mean, Alex Armstrong, I thought, made a really good point. He wrote on X, the courts were open 24/7 for rioters and social media inciters. Far-left ex-Labour councillor Ricky Jones, who wanted throats slit in a large cheering crowd, can spend Christmas at home. His court date has been set for Trump's inauguration to avoid the headlines. Did they think we wouldn't notice? And that's what's absolutely appalling to me. I've been keeping in touch with Lucy Connolly's family. She's the woman who's in prison for an ex post. She's not being given a visit home for Christmas. That has been rejected, which is utterly appalling. Yet Ricky Jones is going to be with his family. I mean, how can you say there's not two-tier justice?
Well, you can't say it's not. I mean, we're in a situation now. It is two-tier justice. It's all sorts of things going on. People doing honest, basically, freedom of speech. All the sorts of things we cherish in our democracy is being persecuted, and yet you can be violent and you can have hate words all over the place, especially on those Hamas rallies. You quite rightly, I've walked down Hyde Park when they were walking down there, and the abuse that the Jewish faith got there, honestly, it made me feel ill. And yet I've also walked on a Jewish rally and no one said one hateful word. I couldn't hear anything. It's unbelievable. We are in a dangerous situation. I think we're plummeting further. And unless Starmer gets hold of this, which I don't believe he's capable of doing, I don't know where we're heading for, mate.
Very good point, Howard Cox. Very, very good point. Now stand by. Of course, the tone that the left want to use for the growing threat of Reform UK is one of a threat. And what I found absolutely fascinating over the weekend is that Harriet Harman, very senior figure within the Labour ranks, decided to ape the same language and the same rhetoric that had been used by Kamala Harris in the US over the course of the election campaign. So rather than actually saying, let's deal with Reform UK, let's see why they're becoming so popular, what do we have to do to change, Harriet Harman went on Sly News and described Nigel Farage as a threat to democracy. Watch.
They came second in 89 seats to Labour. How worried should the party be about the threat, or the challenge, I should say, from Farage?
Well, I think people should be very concerned about reform because they're not just a threat to individual parties, but I actually think they're a threat to democracy because they are offering easy answers to real problems, which are not a solution and will just increase people's distrust and disillusionment. But I think the Shadow Minister who you had on was really in denial about the situation. If you look at the council by-election results, and I'm afraid I look at them every Friday morning very anxiously after the Thursday council by-elections, what they show, I know, is that they show a real fall in Labour's support. If you look at the percentage change, it's not just about who's won, it's who's voting and what the percentage change is. And reform from a standing start is like gaining 40%, whereas the Labour's down, but the Tories are massively down as well. And I think that the main threat to reform currently, from reform, is to the Tory party. And what I didn't see is any acknowledgement, and we haven't seen this either from Kemi Badenoch, that reform is a problem. They're saying it's not a problem. Until they say, look, we're really up against it, they won't start dealing with it.
As Alex Armstrong posted on X, Harriet Harman has called reform a threat to democracy. How well has that rhetoric worked for the Democrats? Reminder that Labour tried to overturn Brexit, and Labour have lied to the public. If there's a threat to be had, it's the establishment. And Nigel Farage agreed, saying the Labour Party are now using the same threat to democracy line that the Democrats used about Trump. Look how that worked out for them. But you're not going to believe it. Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, then went on the British Bashing Corporation to try and blame Nigel Farage and Reform UK, a party that has never held government, a party that has never been in power, for the immigration issues that this country is suffering from today. Because guess what? It's all Brexit's fault.
This is the thing, and let me get to reform, because Susanna rightly raised it. Going forward from here in 2025, they need to be held to account for the consequences of their own policies.
Reform should.
The big lie of Brexit, in my view, needs to be exposed, because they promised us that it would control immigration. It's done the opposite. It's weakened control of immigration, because it's weakened those relationships with our neighbours that are absolutely critical to having an orderly system. But at the same time, it's changed the nature of migration. So they've been issuing more and more visas for people coming from further afield, staying permanently, whereas with free movement, it would have been somebody would come for a few years and then go back. So,
I mean, how utterly extraordinary, Howard Cox. So, okay, firstly, Reform UK is a threat to democracy somehow. God knows how. I mean, what? Nigel wants to make himself the dictator like the left-wing media claimed Trump wanted to. What a joke. But also, the immigration issue is now his fault too. They're desperate, aren't they?
Well, you're exactly right. And the arrogance of both of them, these senior politicians on the left side of our politics, it beggars belief. And, people in glass houses shouldn't actually throw stones. And what they're doing is actually admitting that they are scared of reform. The more they talk about reform being a problem, the more reform will do better in the polls. And long may it continue. And, Nigel is going to be, in my opinion, a real good chance of becoming the next Prime Minister. And I hope he is, because all of his policies are common sense. They're not easy solutions to difficult problems. They are real solutions to difficult problems that no one else has actually considered before. All of what we're saying is rhetoric from all of the other two parties, including the Tories. And what we should be seeing now is some consensus to recognise that these are common sense problems which people support. 4 million voted. We got 5 MPs. That's what we got. And that's growing by the day. There's 110,000 members to the party. It's growing by the day. And I'm proud to be part of Reform UK. I may have a few criticisms about some of the things we do in the party, but that's democracy.
Absolutely.
We are democratic. That's the way we work. So
absolutely, and the party is being democratised, which is something that Nigel insists. I mean, the thing for me is that, look, I'm a critical friend of Reform UK, but I'm very open about the fact that I voted for Reform UK at the last election, because the uni party in this country has to be smashed. The approach to mass immigration has to be smashed. And I have been shocked and horrified by the new Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, who just doesn't seem to get it, Howard. So she went on GB News yesterday, but nothing that she said made me think she has any idea about what her party inflicted upon us with lies. Watch this.
Well, I said during the leadership contest that a cap on its own is not enough, that numbers matter. So yes, a cap, but culture matters more. Who is coming into the country? How are we integrating them? How are we making sure that the people who come to this country care about it? This is not a hostel. It's not a dormitory. This is our home. And then making sure that the leadership follows through. So a cap is something that we can do. But what I don't do is just make random promises without explaining where it's all going to come from. So I said that a cap will be needed, But what is that cap going to be? Let's work out what we can sustain. We're going to need to have a very systemic review. How many homes should we be building? What makes sense? What is happening to our population? Where do we need skills? And make sure that migration is controlled. So we can do a lot on immigration if we're given the chance. But the first thing we need to do is earn trust. And that is why, no matter how tough it is, I will make sure that I hold the Prime Minister to account on immigration at PMQs. We are the opposition, and we've got a job to do, and I'm going to make sure that we do.
Well, I'm sorry, Howard Cox, that trust is gone. Because you had 14 years and you lied to us. Even the 2019 election manifesto was talking about cutting immigration. It never happened. So unless she is going to embrace the Robert Jenrick position of we are ashamed of what we did to the country and we will bring in serious policy change, which she has shown no bravery to do, I'm sorry, I'm done. I'm done with her.
Well, I feel a similar situation. As I said, I spoke to a very senior Tory MP recently in Portcullis House, and we chewed the cud on a number of issues. He's particularly talking about things I'm involved with, road users, strategies, etc. But I made the point, where is Kemi? What is she saying? You can't ask for trust when you've actually destroyed that trust after, you quite rightly say, after 14 years. And, things like small state, the state grew under them. We saw a corporation tax going up from 19 to 25%. Taxes went up. All these sorts of things. We were betrayed, particularly on immigration and on Brexit. Brexit hasn't really truly happened yet. And I'm afraid the only thing that my advice to Nigel Farage, from little old me here, sitting here running a campaign for FairFuel UK for 15 years, is he must unify people, behind him and motivate people and incentivize people with the policies that most people will get behind. And he has to communicate that well. There mustn't be any bickering. There mustn't be any infighting. It's got to be a message of hope, because none of the other two parties can give that.
No, absolutely agree with that. I completely agree with that. But I just don't feel like Kemi understands it at all. She doesn't understand where we're at. She doesn't understand what her party did. And as a result, unfortunately, she has lost trust. And I was prepared to give her a chance because I think all new leaders should be given a chance. But that interview was dire. In fact, at one point, she was even arguing, because we messed it up so badly, that means we're the people to fix it. Hell no. Hell no. What I just want to see is a bit stronger from Nigel. I want him to be talking about mass deportations like Trump is. I want him to be talking about demographic change like Trump is. But I think and hope that will come. Howard, I did just have to show you this, though, from Angela Rayner, because she's talking so much nonsense, right, that someone on the internet did have a little bit of fun.
So 500 million for the affordable homes programme. We've already allowed flexibility with that, so we get thousands more affordable homes on the market.
It's nowhere near enough for councils to build the number of affordable homes that the country needs, is it?
Well, we've made changes and put more funding in, and we also made sure that councils could keep their right to buy receipts in full so that they can increase their stock as well. So there's a number of measures we've taken which will mean we'll build the biggest amount of affordable and social housing for a generation. You can't put an exact figure on each site because it very much depends on the viability and the size of the site and what becomes available. But we're very clear that home ownership needs to be delivered for those that have just had that dream snatched away from them, and we're going to deliver that.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, Howard, 2.6 million are coming in, and where are they going to be housed? I mean, she is Princess Pinocchio. She's the new Princess Pinocchio. Move over Meghan Markle, right?
Well, whoever did that wonderful video is so clever. I mean, AI and all the other photoshopping, whatever they do these days, that was so real. It was incredible.
It was absolutely incredible. Loved that. Okay, Howard Cox, do stand by. Back with you in just 1 minute, because a major development on the Lucy Letby story. Now, I know when I spoke about this a few weeks ago, it was considered controversial, so just stand by and we will get to that shortly. But first, with the holidays creeping up faster than your aunt's fruitcake recipe, I've got something way better to share with you. If you want to look sharp for all those festive gatherings and maybe finally win the best groomed at the Family Dinner Award, check out the latest masterpiece from Manscaped, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver. Trust me, It's like Rudolph for your face, guiding you to a smooth, irritation-free shave. I use it every day, and it is brilliant. So let's dive into the goods. The Chairman Pro is armed with not one, but two interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. Think of them as your grooming superheroes. The skin-safe 4-blade foil for when you want that baby bottom smooth, and the skin-safe stubble trimmer for when you want to keep some stubble but clean it up a bit. Both keep you looking sharp while minimizing razor burn and irritation, because no one wants to show up to the holiday party looking like they've lost a fight with a Christmas tree, right? But wait, there is more. The Chairman Pro has Flex Adjust technology, which is basically like the holiday miracle of shaving. It's like Santa's elves made it just for you, because the blades and pivoting head adjust to every curve of your face and is gentle on the neck area as if they had the gift of foresight. So go ahead, kiss that awkward jawline patch goodbye. No more pretending it doesn't exist while you hope nobody notices under the mistletoe. And if you want even more precision, on the right side of the bracket, there's a precision lock. When you lock it, the blade head sits firm so you can achieve a more precise shave. And here's something that's going to make your grooming routine even easier. The Chairman Pro is waterproof, so you can use it right in the shower. And the waterproof feature doesn't just make shaving easier, it also simplifies cleanup too. Just a quick rinse under the sink and you're all set. The Chairman Pro isn't just for daily shaves either. It's powerful enough to tackle up to 5-day growth, making it perfect whether you're shaving every day or just tidying up after a few days. And with up to 75 minutes of runtime on a single charge, you'll have plenty of juice to go from Santa's beard to smooth as a snow angel. It even has a travel lock to help make sure it doesn't accidentally turn on in your bag, and an LED spotlight to help you see every detail, ensuring nothing gets missed. So get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is as smooth as you deserve. It has everything you need to keep your face looking and feeling its best, all in one box. So head on over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide like me who trust Manscaped. If you use the coupon code Outspoken at checkout, guess what? You get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. So let me just repeat that, www.manscaped.com using the coupon code Outspoken. But now, back to the show. Breaking right now, a bombshell development. In the case of Lucy Letby, the nurse who I believe, and you know I put my opinion very strongly on this earlier this year, I believe is one of the victims of the biggest miscarriages of justice in British history. I appreciate this is a controversial conversation, and I appreciate not all of you like what I have to say on this. But her barrister, Mark MacDonald, told a news conference at the Royal Society of Medicine London today that the lead prosecution expert, Dr. Dewey Evans, has altered his view. According to Mark MacDonald, he said, Dr. Evans has now remarkably changed his mind on the cause of death of 3 of the babies, baby C, baby I, and baby P, and as a result, her convictions are no longer safe. Watch this.
Lucy Letby knows you're making this statement today. How does she feel about that and the prospect of the case being reopened?
Everything I do is with the consent of my lay client and my professional client, my instructing solicitor. How would you feel? How would anybody feel? You're a 34-year-old woman, you've been sentenced to life imprisonment without any hope, and suddenly we found such profound and significant evidence that may possibly overturn your conviction. I leave it to you to decide how you would feel about that.
And there was more from the press conference. Watch.
This is a miscarriage of justice. That is my focus. From my experience in miscarriage of justice cases, is when there are significant doubts, it doesn't go away. We will still be talking. If this matter is not properly reviewed, if this matter does not go back to trial and fresh evidence called before the jury, we will be continuing. And so the best thing to do is actually to have this matter before the Court of Appeal, go on the fresh evidence that we now have, and go back to a trial and present that fresh evidence before the jury.
And he is completely right. Look, I understand, and I do recommend you go and read my Substack about this, because I outlined all of my views. I understand why, if you have just consumed the mainstream media coverage of Lucy Letby, you might believe that she really is the angel of death. But I promise you, this case stinks. Of course, I feel so sorry for the family members of the young children, the babies who died, because they do not want to have to go through this again. But the sanctity of our court process matters. And look, just listen to this new Canadian-based expert, Richard Taylor, who is absolutely horrified by what he's discovered about the trial.
I don't think it's right that we name names at this stage.
I think the doctor knows who they are.
We don't.
I know. I have to say, from a personal point of view, that if this had happened to me, I'd be unable to sleep at night, knowing that what I had done had led to the death of the baby, and now there is a nurse in jail convicted of murder.
Having looked at the evidence, how strong do you think the evidence against Lucy Letby is compared to your theory? That, as I understand it, the doctor accidentally killed the baby by mistake.
The claim was that I think that Lucy Letby had injected air into the baby. I'm not even sure what the prosecution was claiming, but it's nonsense. Complete nonsense. The baby died from shock, from a liver perforation.
I mean, Howard Cox, you've got one of the biggest neonatal experts in the world putting his reputation on the line there, saying, this is just wrong. I mean, using the word nonsense, that's not usually the type of language you hear from medical professionals unless they are absolutely certain. And remember, there's loads of other stuff here that doesn't stack up about Lucy Letby. I mean, one of the main reasons she was convicted in the court of public opinion, you'll remember, was because of this note. Do you remember she'd written a note that seemed to suggest she was guilty? But in fact, it was actually something that was written on the advice of counsellors, and she was told to put down all of her emotions. So yes, she wrote, I am evil, I did this, but she also wrote, I'm not good enough, why me, I haven't done anything wrong, police investigation is slander, discrimination, investigation. So to me, Howard Cox, I'm sorry, I cannot understand how this woman doesn't get another trial.
Well, this is a revelation to me today, Dan. I didn't realise this sort of thing. I also bought into the mainstream media the fact she was the angel of death, and if she was coerced into actually admitting that she did this, and that we got these experts, incredibly, the top experts in the world saying it's nonsense, she couldn't have done that. The baby died of shock. Of course, it's sad they died. The most important thing is, where was the supervision and why was it allowed to happen? Where were the people behind this watching these babies die? Why is it just Lucy Letby is to blame? I don't know what's the truth here, Dan. I mean, but listening to what you're saying, she deserves an appeal.
Absolutely. And the thing is, Howard, I did look into it for a long time. It was one of those cases that when I was finally free of my mainstream media shackles, I got to tell the truth, because again, I know there were loads of people behind the scenes at GB News, Howard, who knew that Lucy Letby was innocent, but none of them would go on television to say it because it wasn't a palatable thing. So you've got to be brave in this independent space. But honestly, Howard, there is other stuff that doesn't add up. Like, there was sewage seeping into the ward. The CPS has admitted that the swipe card data used in the trial was wrong. Experts were not called to give evidence on Letby's behalf because many felt that they might be cancelled by the medical establishment if they did so. And actually, I think this is something that a lot of people who haven't followed the case closely will find absolutely shocking. Not a single person, Howard, saw Letby do a single thing. Certainly not harm a baby. So there's no CCTV, there's no DNA evidence. This is all based on circumstantial evidence that was at least in part misrepresented. And I actually got a couple of the experts on the show about this. Norman Fenton, who was a mathematician at Queen Mary University, and he looks at the probabilities and clusters, because one of the main things that convicted Lucy Letby was this chart showing that she was in hospital working while many of the deaths occurred, but it doesn't add up. And also Dr. Scott McLaughlin, who is an incredible man, actually, who works at King's College London within the Faculty of Nursing, Midwifery and Palliative Care. And they are both convinced that Letby is innocent for a whole load of reasons, right? Because that shift pattern chart doesn't add up. Scott says the babies were actually far sicker than presented at trial. And also, just that it would have been completely practically impossible for her to commit this killing spree. So it's worth, people can go back and watch the full episode, but it is worth just having a little look at what they told me. Letby was convicted of 7 murders and 7 attempted murders of babies in intensive care. No one saw Letby do a single thing. There is no CCTV. There is no DNA evidence. Former Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir David Davis believes there is a 90% chance Letby is not guilty.
The police were potentially already concerned about the value of this statistical evidence.
The statistical value of the chart is pretty much zero.
You could take any nurse and build a similar chart which looks exactly like that if you only look at the deaths which occurred when those people were on duty.
And this is why it's so easy to wrongly convict a nurse if the whole establishment comes down looking for you to be the easy person to blame.
When you look at the babies in the Letby trial, you've got babies who were born as early as 27 weeks gestation. The babies were nowhere near as stable and healthy and strong as was presented during the trial.
So as I say, Howard Cox, I understand that it's highly sensitive talking about this. My God, my heart breaks for the families. But I had to speak out. I had to speak out because I'd done my own research, and I did it for months and months and months. And I was absolutely certain before I spoke out, Howard. And remember, a lot of highly respected people in lots of fields have. I mean, look at Peter Hitchens, for example, one of the journalists who got it completely right on COVID from the off. Nadine Dorries, a former health minister, a nurse herself in a previous life. Not to mention David Davis, who is one of the most respected Conservative Party MPs, who has spent months of his own time going through the research because he is so convinced that Letby deserves a retrial. And even though he thinks she needs a retrial rather than an acquittal, his personal viewpoint, Howard, is that she is innocent.
Well, that's a good point. But surely the baby's parents, the family, they want to get to the bottom of the truth. I'm sure they wouldn't want an innocent person going to, well, basically she's been committed to how many life sentences she's been put to. They would want the truth coming out too.
No, of course they would. Of course they would. But the problem is, Howard, they have spent, 2 very, very traumatic years of their life in court, believing what the state had told them. And the problem is, when you really start looking into this, Howard, and this is something you do know a lot about, there has been a desire by the health establishment to find a victim. And again, to find a scapegoat here. And I believe Lucy Letby is a victim because she became the scapegoat. And this is something that has happened in other foreign countries as well. And it's fascinating, actually, if you look at that poll on my Substack, the majority of the audience, once they had read it, believes that she is innocent.
Well, you can put me into that category too. I wasn't aware of this detail. I knew about David Davis saying that, the findings, the result, it was unsafe. And I didn't read it in detail. I saw the headlines, but now I will look into this very deeply because I'm shocked by the revelations that have come out today.
Yeah, a lot of this actually happened when the New Yorker ran a very detailed investigation into the Lucy Letby case. And for people who want to know more, it's a long read, but I really recommend it because it sums up a lot of the evidence in one place. But goodness me, Howard Cox, what a busy day. A busy day of breaking news, Howard. And actually, I'll just get your reaction very quickly to the other piece of breaking news, which has developed over the last couple of hours, which is that Prince Andrew, we learn, will not be attending the royal family Christmas at Sandringham after his links to the Chinese spy, or the alleged Chinese spy, who has now today been named by a judge. Do you feel this was the right decision to stop Andrew celebrating Christmas with his family? He's going to spend it with Fergie, apparently.
I may be a bit provocative here, but I don't think anyone should stop people celebrating with their family. I think it's wrong. I think Charles and Edward and Anne should actually come out and give him a bit of support, because the guy is being persecuted all over the place. He may be guilty, but I understand this Chinese spy spoke to David Cameron and Theresa May and over the period of time. So why are they not being persecuted along the same way? All I can say to you is that it's good to see it's out, because I understand Lee Anderson was going to, under parliamentary privilege, was going to reveal the name in Parliament, but the judge got there first. So at least we know who this person is. But Andrew is a sad case, I know that, but he's still got he's a family man, and he's got family, his brothers, sisters, his two brothers and sisters. You know, he should be allowed to spend time with them.
No, Howard, do you know what? Number one, this is why I love you. Number two, this is why I think it's really great that we're out of the mainstream to have these conversations. Because again, if you're in the mainstream media, you might as well talk about Prince Andrew as if he's Hitler, right? A guy who hasn't been found guilty of anything. Now, as you say, when it comes to the spy Yang Teng Bo, that's the name of the spy, which has been released today by the courts in the UK. He was with David Cameron. He was with Theresa May. No one's trying to say that they shouldn't get to spend family with their Christmas. Now, look, yes, Prince Andrew has been a bit of an embarrassment, but I think this is really awkward for the royal family, Howard. And we're going to speak about this more in the after show with Steph, the Alter Nerd, today, because when you think about it, we criticize Harry and Meghan so much, I think quite rightly, because of the way that they turned on their own family. They slagged their own family off. Now, Andrew isn't doing that, but his whole family are going to gather in Sandringham, and him and Fergie are forced to stay at Royal Lodge. And also, we learn now that Eugenie and Beatrice will not be at the Christmas either. So, look, if Andrew had actually done something wrong here, but it feels to me like he was misled by this Chinese guy, in the same way that lots of major Brits were. And yeah, I think being banned by your own family from Christmas after the year they've had, Charles cancer, Catherine cancer, it's not great. But Howard Cox, very much appreciate you and everything you do. And thank you for your honesty as always, Howard, today. I love having you on Outspoken.
Thank you. Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yes, indeed. Have a great one. We'll speak in 2025.
Cheers then. Thank you.
But as I mentioned, in the uncancelled after show today, we have, for the first time, I'm very excited about this, Steph, the Alter Nerd, the YouTube sensation. And she is going to be revealing how the arch-be-kind woke hypocrite Meghan Markle is at the centre of a sweatshop scandal. But we're also going to be talking about this breaking news that Prince Andrew and Fergie will not attend Christmas at Sandringham. You know, it's very important to me that we have a safe space, not patrolled by big tech, where censorship and control runs deep. That's why I've launched Outspoken.live. It's my Substack. I've written about my meeting with Tommy Robinson. So if you head there right now, www.outspoken.live, you can read all about that. I really would appreciate you signing up to subscribe. You just have to enter your email address in that inbox, and it just gives us the opportunity to stay in touch without the need for big tech gatekeepers. Substack is a platform which is completely focused on free speech. So www.outspoken.live is the address. You can sign up completely for free, although if you are able to go for the paid membership, you get to watch the uncancelled after show live every weekday at 6 p.m. UK time. Now, really looking forward to tomorrow, back at 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, with Father Calvin Robinson and Angela Levin. Make sure you hit subscribe right now on YouTube and Rumble. And most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you. We'll see you on the after show on Substack very shortly, I hope.